recruitment business. I joined Butler Rose around 4 to 5 months ago after my business 2084 was acquired by Butler Rose. I ran 2084 for 9 years. Really exciting time. It was a recruitment business, again, specialised in exactly these areas, fin crime, compliance and risk. So I've transitioned now into Butler Rose, which is really exciting.
Oh, glad to have you on here. I've wanted to have you on here for a while. So again, you have one of the unique perspectives on kind of the compliance market, because you are speaking with employers and you're also speaking with the compliance professionals themselves. So to kick us off, what would you say is kind of the biggest, like kind of top 3 things that you'd say you're seeing in the compliance market at the moment, just generally in terms of what employers are looking for?
I think that's a good question, and to some extent, I would say that at the moment, employers are looking for similar things in some roles. So, but for example, if we were talking about financial crime operations, as an example, some of the skill sets are similar, and regulatory knowledge, stakeholder management skills, things like that are still king. However, what we're seeing is that there are fewer roles in that space, for example. I think businesses are going through senior leaders in compliance, MLROs are going through a kind of a transitionary period at the moment. There is a directive from the CEOs of businesses to look into AI, and to try and understand how AI can make the business leaner and make compliance leaner, cut costs, etc. So I think things will change, and certainly we are seeing some roles where AI is a requirement, or knowledge of AI and the ability to use it to make processes on a day-to-day basis more efficient. A good example of that really is some of the interview processes that we're seeing at the moment. So a couple of years ago, when AI, ChatGPT was in its infancy, I guess it was more around, is AI being used to cheat on, say, tasks and assessments and interview processes? Has this been written by AI, or has it actually been written by a person? Whereas now, quite often, I'm getting the similar task coming through, but the directive is candidates are allowed to use AI on these, but we'd like to know how you've used the AI, what the prompts are, etc. Because I think it's recognised that AI is here to stay, and actually it's important that compliance professionals know how to use it. So I guess businesses want people that understand it and can use it and make processes more efficient. So there's some quite interesting changes happening.
That's super interesting, because I think, oh wow, so I've not seen that actually. So that's a massive change. I remember earlier ads, they kind of had like literally big bold letters, do not use AI for this. You will be automatically disqualified from the process. And now to kind of, you can use AI, disclose your provenance, etc., etc. So I guess in your view, do you think there's a disconnect between what employers are communicating in terms of these AI usage and AI knowledge and AI experience in ads, and actually what employees have and what they understand they need to have? I'll give you my opinion first. I think there is, in the sense that sometimes I see wording kind of like not crypto native, AI native, and I'm kind of like, well, what exactly does that mean? Are you talking about the advent of generalist LLMs like ChatGPT in 2022? Or are we talking about you've been researching machine learning since 2010 and you've been in the evolution of the space? Like, what does that mean? Because I wouldn't describe myself as crypto native, and I'm a crypto native, AI native, and I'm an AI co-founder. So kind of the wording I've seen when I've seen job ads has actually been quite generic. And if I'm looking for a role, I'm not able to look at that ad and think, okay, this is where I need to upskill, if that makes sense. What's your views on that?
Yeah, I think it does make a difference on what type of role is being looked at, really. So I think if it's a financial crime role, for example, that is heavily focused on data and analytics,
Yeah,
then I would understand that type of terminology
yeah,
being placed on the job ad, because that is a key requirement for that sort of
mhm,
role. And as an agent, a recruitment agent, those are the types of roles that we are seeing more of,
interesting.
because those are sometimes can be the more challenging hires. So we tend to
Mhm,
see the more challenging hires and we're seeing less KYC roles, for example, because internal talent teams will fill those.
mhm,
If it's a more generic, well, not generic, but a more generalist role, compliance generalist role, yeah, I mean that is a good question. What does AI native mean? I mean, I think that similar to what I said earlier, some of the skill sets are still on job specs. The regulatory knowledge is still really
yeah,
important. Stakeholder management is super important. Some of the less process orientated skills,
mhm,
because AI in some cases is doing that, is critical. But I think what I'm seeing is just a general acknowledgement that if people are they're savvy around AI. They've got some qualifications in it.
mhm,
Perhaps they've shown that an interest in it. They can demonstrate that they can use it or have used, like you say,
mhm,
ChatGPT or Claude or something like that to improve processes in their current roles. That's an interesting thing to talk about in interviews. Whereas, I guess, with regard to KYC systems or transaction monitoring systems, in some cases, there may be a requirement around that. But
mhm.
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question because it's all quite new.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So yeah, what does it mean? And I think it really does vary from hiring manager to hiring manager.
yeah. I agree,
So
and I guess. Sorry, go ahead.
no, it's all good.
I guess as time goes on, descriptions will become more and more specific, regardless of whether you're first line, second line, or working in an audit. And on that point, actually, this kind of brings to my mind. So let's say I'm in the market, I'm looking for a role. How have you seen, so on the kind of employee end now, worker end, practitioner end, how have you seen AI, or have you seen AI impacting how people are applying for roles? And in your view, has this been positive, neutral, or sometimes negative? Like, what are you seeing in the market on that?
Yeah, I mean, with regards to the way people are applying to roles, I mean, I guess that if you're applying to a job advert, quite often you'd be using a CV in most cases.
Hmm.
So I have people are using AI to help with their CVs, which completely understandable. The only caution I would say there is that I have seen some CVs that appear to be written by AI without too much human input.
Yeah.
Um, that's just something to be a little bit careful of, I would say. So my advice around sort of AI and CV writing would be very much around write it in your own voice to start with,
Yeah.
and then use AI to enhance it. For example, introduce keywords that you might not have added into it, things like that to make sure that it gets picked up on a search. With regards, I mean, there is a lot of conversation on LinkedIn, for example, around applicant tracking systems that are rejecting CVs based on candidates not having their keywords on them. I mean, I'm not an expert in that because we don't use one of those. We do review them ourselves manually. But when we review a CV, what we do is we put in keywords ourselves in what we
Hmm.
call a Boolean search. So, for example, if someone had applied to a KYC role for B2B, I might put in KYC in corporates, for example,
Yeah.
and it'll bring those candidates up that are most relevant to the role. So, I think it is important to have keywords on your CV that can be found. And also, I'd say that recruiters like myself and also internal recruiters, even though we do put adverts on for roles, we do run searches for candidates. Um, so I'd recommend uploading your CV with the AI enhanced keywords on it to LinkedIn, because then
Okay.
that is searchable when we're
Okay.
searching.
Interesting.
Um, yeah,
Okay, super interesting. I guess the first thing you said, I get just should be the caveat with any AI usage, to be honest. Don't ever put it in without checking your outputs. I've heard
Yeah.
of some kind of situations where a candidate has uploaded a CV and then you've gone into an interview, they've asked you a question and actually it's put something in that you wouldn't have put in yourself, or maybe it's kind of embellished a certain thing that you wouldn't
Mm.
have kind of embellished yourself. So that's a really good point. Again, similar to what you were saying before, I remember a time when there was almost like negative chatter around using AI with a job application process, whether that's a CV or if you're on a employer website and they're showing you like additional questions, not to use AI with that. But I guess now that has changed as well because it's almost just accepted that candidates will and are using CVs, AI embellished or AI generated CVs. On that point, just to dig into it a bit further, let's say you go into a CV and you mentioned you can tell when there's one you've looked at and it has had little or no human input. What are the key tells for you when you can tell, yeah, do you know what, this is just gone through ChatGPT or Claude and they've not looked at this?
I think sometimes it's the format of the CV.
Yeah.
And when you see quite a few CVs that are written in a similar format as if I was to
Yeah.
say to ChatGPT, write my CV, and then it prints it out, and then I kind of just post that. It has a universal format
Yeah.
that looks like it comes from a ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot or whichever tool it is. The structure of the CV is relatively similar
Mhm.
to other ones. Um, Sometimes they're very high level as well, like really high level. There's very little detail on there. Similar color schemes, things like that.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think I, it, I would just caution against doing that really,
Mm.
because. But what I am seeing now is that CVs do seem to be enhanced by AI rather than written solely by AI, and I think that's a really positive thing.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's a good thing, and it's a tool that can help you
Yeah.
if you use it correctly, and AI is being used in other areas, for example, like
Mhm.
at the recruiter's end in some firms and things like that. So I completely understand it from a job applicant's perspective that they want to give themselves the best chance of success in what is a challenging market, and AI can help. So
100%.
it makes sense to use it, but it just needs to be used in the right way, really.
Yeah, really good points. And I suppose the whole point of a CV is to make yourself stand apart and stand out as a unique candidate. So you don't want your
Yeah,
AI usage to just make you blend into a sea of ChatGPT generated CVs, essentially. No, it makes a lot of sense. And I
yeah,
guess moving into actually people in roles now, because I know that you'll also see kind of in your privileged position, you're getting feedback from practitioners like myself that are actually in roles, and how it'd be interesting to see whether you've been seeing or hearing anything on how AI is impacting functions for people that are in roles, whether they're first line, second line, advisory, operations, what how that has changed. 'Cause I guess it's gone from not really much of a conversation in I would say kind of 2023 or even in 2024 when we founded ChatKYC, there wasn't much chatter and now there is a lot more. So how are you seeing it's impacting how roles are looking and what do you think that looks like for the
yeah.
future?
Well, I'm sure, Omas, you know better than me, but I guess AI sort of related tools have been used in the first line for a long time.
Yeah.
KYC systems and transaction monitoring systems and things like that. So I think the changes in the first line are probably enhancements to what was
Mhm.
already there to some degree. But yeah, I mean, certainly the businesses I'm talking to are using it for checking documentation,
Mhm.
transaction monitoring. There are some use cases around quality control and quality assurance, so that the compliance professionals themselves can have more time to review
Mhm.
the flags, I suppose,
Yeah.
or the outputs from that AI. We are seeing speaking to senior people within this space, there is definitely a desire to use AI to streamline things and improve things. We've seen tools that are used in the second line as well, for horizon scanning. Horizon scanning and gap analysis is a strong use case for it, because the tool will continuously or perpetually, if you like, review regulations from the regulator and do a gap analysis against internal policies. So that seems to be a very good use case, which does save time. But it's interesting because it'd be good to get your thoughts on this. But I guess it does. I think the cost savings do take a bit of time to feed through, because in some cases it's not necessarily replacing headcount. It's just enabling headcount to do things more efficiently and take on more tasks. So it's not necessarily saving costs. It might be adding costs because you've still got the headcount and then you're adding the AI costs. So, but I think that's probably a short-term thing, and the cost savings will come later. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of change happening, and I think really we're in the early stages of it.
100%.
I mean, I probably speak to 10 to 20 heads of compliance and MLROs a week, and I'd say 90% of those are in the process of analysing how they can implement AI, how they can make things more efficient, but they're still in that process. They haven't fully done it yet, so we're in that transitionary period.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. And my advice to anybody is you want to take as much time as you need in that initial discovery phase. What can sometimes happen, not just in compliance, but generally in corporate businesses, is that there's a rush to implement AI. And if it's not done correctly for whatever your use case is or the nature of your organization, not only will you not have those time savings, you could have additional cost. You can have kind of cultural issues, impact on kind of employee morale, and actually you then have to spend more time either working out how to use that tool or finding another tool. So that initial discovery process is very important. I think as well, you made a very good point about the fact that AI, in terms of artificial intelligence, it's not a new thing. I think that's what I always tell people. Anytime, if you go back even to 2010, you have an adverse media screening tool, nameless screening, sanction screening. All of these tools were using some element of artificial intelligence in terms of, maybe call it machine learning back then. So it's not a new thing. Where we are now was simply just an evolution of the technology that's existed. So I agree with you. Where I think the impacts have been most profound have been in the second line, because before, I don't think really, like, not in my experience anyway, that you would have a tool that could draft a policy for you or kind of even analyze gap analysis and give you an output that you can read, not to the degree of what we have now. I'd also say, in terms of AI, I always use the term a human-centric approach. So if an organization goes in and the main focus is, this is going to be a way for us to save costs, reduce headcount, it's probably not going to work as well. You need to work with the team you have on the ground. So you need to understand, okay, what are our existing processes and where are our pain points? What do we actually want to solve, or what do we want to improve? Where can we give analysts time back? Where can we give our second line time back? As opposed to, I want to put AI in and I want to save loads of money, and I want to sometimes half my compliance headcount. And my opinion is, and I think this will happen anyway, there will probably be a load of remediation programs in the next few years where companies have done that and now they're having to fix the problem. So I think my advice would be, take as long as you need in that discovery phase, because once, especially as an enterprise business, once you're in, it's hard to come out, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And I think your point is really good there on the potential remediation projects. So I guess part of this implementation of AI and perhaps this maybe kind of newish, perhaps, is it newish? It'd be good to get your thoughts on this newish role for compliance officers will be around making sure that there are strong policies in place to provide guardrails or governance around the AI that is actually being used, and what happens if that AI goes wrong, and what does the regulator think about that?
100%. It's a really good point. I think one thing I'll say is that let's take the FCA, for example. There doesn't have to be, they don't have to bring out specific rules on AI for companies to have responsible AI usage in play now. What do I mean by that? Right now, the FCA will have a mandate that you have to be accountable for the decisions you make as a firm. So whether that's your policy decisions, how you decide to onboard customers, how you categorize high-risk customers, who is responsible for that whole, all the risk decisioning. Right now, that is something the FCA has clearly laid out. You implementing AI and having an agentic AI kind of take responsibility for that doesn't shift your accountability. Those laws, those rules still apply. So I suppose to your point, how I see AI changing roles across the first and the second line will be, we will almost be stewards and of these AI kind of tools, AI processes. So for example, let's say you have a transaction monitoring tool, which we've established, machine learning has already been there, but now we have a situation where we have agentic payments. For that to even be acceptable from a regulatory perspective, you will also have to have a tool in play that can, in real time, assess the risk of potential payments as they're happening. That's not really possible or scalable with a human headcount fine. So you'll have to have, let's say you have the agentic payment flow, you'll have to have an agentic kind of flow also to be QAing those payments in real time. And then you then need your humans in the loop that will, they will design the flow for the agentic payments. And then you'll have to also have to have humans in the loop that will design the QA system. But then the QA system itself also needs to be tested and to make sure that, okay, let's take a sample, 10%. Are we happy with how it's assessing these transactions? Are we happy with how it's providing the quality assurance? So all of a sudden, all you have is an iterative loop. So the idea of humans kind of being reduced, actually, depending on the scope of your firm, you're going to actually have to hire additional headcount to actually be responsible for these systems, both in terms of designing the systems and the ongoing monitoring. And if you're a firm that is conducting thousands of payments a day, that's quite an involved job. In order for you to prove to the regulator that you're a responsible business and you're adequately managing your risks, I actually am not convinced with the argument that headcount will reduce. Depends on your firm. You may actually need more people because now you can do more. There's now more to manage. There's more to QA. Those are just my thoughts anyway.
Yeah, I mean that's yeah, I think you're right. I think certainly in the short to medium term, before the full efficiencies are realised, you're going to need people to ensure that the governance is in place. Absolutely, 100%. And also I guess from a CFO perspective, there are still additional costs around the AI costs, the technology costs, infrastructure, data security, etc. So yeah, I mean, I think it will be interesting. And maybe it's a compliance thing, but in some areas the cost savings could be higher. So for example, I'm not an expert in this, but perhaps customer service, for example, and some other areas like that. It's very, very operational. Things can be done using AI bots, for example, and things like that. The cost savings there could be realised maybe quicker. But in areas like compliance and anti-financial crime, I think it will take longer, and it's a more complex process to realise real cost savings, I think.
That's a really good point. And I suppose where regulators across the globe will go was actually mandating firms to assess any risk pertinent to their AI usage. So to your point now, the risk involved in a customer services agent or that kind of like customer service agent is completely different to fully putting your sanction screening on an agentic flow, or like your payments on an agentic flow. One clearly carries more risk than the other, so will require more human input. So I think firms will also be required to actually show that they've made an assessment on that risk and can kind of, I guess, evidence to whether it's the FCA, whoever the regulator is, that they've adequately assessed the risks. And this is why we have this AI tool in place. This is why we've done the governance like this. These are the people we have in the loop, so on and so forth. But I guess in terms of last thoughts, what would be, I would say, to leave the audience with for people that are in roles right now, trying to either move into a different role, or people that are actually not in a role and they're looking, what would be some of the top tips that you'd give them to kind of A, stay positive in a tough market, and B, to maybe use like this new technology, AI, what have you, to help them stand out in job interviews?
I mean, I would say it is a tough market. So I think in some ways, you kind of need to adapt the way that you're job hunting. So yeah, like we said earlier in the conversation, do use AI to enhance your applications, for example. But there is a lot of noise on. A lot of people use LinkedIn, for example, for applications. So there is a lot of noise on there, almost too much noise. And if there's 700 people applying to a role, and that role suddenly gets filled internally, the chances of actually getting a job off the back of an application is very small. It's almost like winning the lottery, really. So that you have to deploy lots of different ways of job searching, and I would say it's almost going, dare I say it, kind of back, almost a bit more old school and a bit more backwards, in that it's very much tapping into your networks and who do you know, both in terms of recruiters like myself, who do you know and trust, and who can help you find something, who have you got a relationship. But it's also tapping into your own personal networks. Who have you worked with before? Where are they now? Where's your which company does your cousin work in? Who do they know? Who can refer you in? Because there's a lot of noise out there and there's a lot of candidates, and I think people are willing to work with people that they know or have been referred to them, because it saves them having to do a lot of screening. So I think to really dive into your networks and have a think about how you could utilize those the best. I think that's important, and I think doing the job that I do, I am generally quite a resilient person, and I think it can be tricky if you find yourself in the job market and you haven't had to take a lot of knockbacks. But I think you just stick with it. You're good at what you do. You're a good person. You've got good skills. It's a challenging market, but you just set yourself a daily schedule, what you need to do, who you need to speak to, which roles you need to apply to, and just run that like clockwork and keep going. Really, that would be my advice. And I'm sure you will find something.
Yeah, that's really good advice, Quentin. It's been a pleasure. Thanks all for tuning in. Till next time. Cheers,
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
bye.